Elliot Kane had always preferred silence, not the oppressive kind that made you question your place in the universe, but the soft, familiar quiet that came with a life lived on the edge of routine. His home, a creaky two-story relic of pre-singularity architecture, sat at the outskirts of New Seattle, nestled among towering spruce trees and the faint hum of wind turbines. The city skyline, a jagged silhouette of chrome and glass, flickered in the distance like a distant constellation. It was a Tuesday night, and Elliot was doing what he did best, avoiding anything remotely social. A cup of synth tea steamed lazily on the cluttered table beside him, surrounded by half-disassembled robotics projects and a stack of outdated holo novels. The latest AI companion he'd been testing, a sassy but ultimately unhelpful orb named Lila, hovered nearby, her blue light flickering as she offered unsolicited advice. "You know, Elliot," Lila chirped, "statistically speaking, humans who socialize live longer. Not that I'd miss you or anything, but maybe consider leaving the house sometime this century?" "Thanks, Lila," Elliot muttered, not looking up from the tangled mess of wires in his hands. "I'll add make friends to my to-do list, right after rebuild intergalactic peace and learn to enjoy kale." Before Lila could offer a retort, a sharp knock echoed through the house. Elliot froze, his brow furrowing. No one ever knocked on his door, not even the delivery drones, which had long since perfected the art of dropping packages without human interaction. The knock came again, louder this time. Lila, ever the dramatist, dimmed her light and whispered, "Ooh, maybe it's an assassin, or worse, a door-to-door solar panel salesman." "Very funny," Elliot said, setting the wires down. He moved cautiously to the door, his mind racing through possibilities. A neighbor? Unlikely. He'd lived here for 5 years and couldn't name a single one. A lost traveler? Even less likely. The nearest road was a mile away, and the dense forest wasn't exactly tourist-friendly. He opened the door a crack, fully prepared to deliver an awkward excuse to whoever was standing there. But the words died in his throat. She stood on the porch, bathed in the soft glow of the motion-activated lights. Her appearance was impossible. Her skin, a shimmering cascade of translucent hues, refracted the light like a living prism. Her eyes, large and luminous, held an otherworldly depth that seemed to peer straight through him. Her hair, if it could even be called that, flowed like liquid starlight, defying gravity as it swirled gently around her shoulders. Elliot's first thought was that he'd finally lost it. Too many late nights tinkering with malfunctioning tech had finally fried his brain. His second thought was far less coherent, a jumble of memories, emotions, and a single name. "Kalith?" he whispered, barely audible. The alien woman tilted her head, a small smile playing at the corners of her lips. "Hello, Elliot. It's been a while." Elliot blinked, his grip tightening on the doorframe. "A while? Try 20 years. What are you doing here? How are you here?" Kalith stepped forward, her movements graceful yet oddly human. "You once told me that love could transcend galaxies. I'm here to test that theory." For a moment, the only sound was the distant hum of the wind turbines. Then Lila, who had floated to the doorway to investigate, broke the silence with a deadpan comment. "Oh, great. Another cosmic drama. Should I prepare the popcorn?" Elliot shot her a glare before turning back to Kalith. This can't be real. You're supposed to be light years away. And how do you even know where I live?" Kalith's smile widened, a hint of mischief in her expression. "Your Earth technology isn't as secure as you think. It wasn't hard to find you once I decided to come." "Decided to come?" Elliot repeated, his voice rising slightly. "Kalith, you can't just show up after 2 decades and—" He stopped, his words catching on the flood of emotions he didn't have the bandwidth to process. "Why are you here?" Kalith's gaze softened. "I told you, I want to feel love again. And you? You're the only human who's ever shown me what that means." Elliot ran a hand through his graying hair, his mind spinning. He wanted to say something profound, something that would match the gravity of the moment. Instead, what came out was, "You picked a terrible time. I was just about to fix my toaster. Kalith laughed, a melodic sound that seemed to reverberate in the air around her. Some things never change, do they? Elliot sighed, stepping aside to let her in. Fine, but if this is some kind of intergalactic prank, I'm not falling for it. As Kalith entered the house, her shimmering presence seemed to make the dimly lit space feel both smaller and infinitely more expansive. Lila, ever the skeptic, floated closer to her. So, you're an alien, huh? Got any cool gadgets? Laser beams? Universal translators? Kalith raised an eyebrow, her smile turning sly. I have a device that can analyze and amplify emotions, but it's not for entertainment. Lila let out a mock gasp. Ooh, cryptic. I like her already. Elliot groaned, rubbing his temples. This is going to be a long night. And so, the quiet life Elliot had so carefully constructed began to unravel, one shimmering thread at a time. Elliot sat at his dining table, staring at Kalith across the room, as if she were a particularly complicated equation he had no hope of solving. She, meanwhile, was studying the contents of his refrigerator with a mix of fascination and mild horror. Elliot, she called out, holding up a carton of synth milk. What is this? It claims to be dairy, but it's clearly not. It's a long story, he replied, rubbing the bridge of his nose. Let's just say cows are an endangered species now, and humanity decided we'd rather drink algae-based substitutes than admit defeat. Kalith tilted her head, her shimmering hair catching the dim light of the room. And this? She pulled out a jar of something green and gelatinous. That's pickled kelp. It's an acquired taste. She sniffed it cautiously before setting it back in the fridge. Your species has a remarkable ability to turn survival into culinary masochism. Elliot snorted despite himself. Glad to see your sense of humor hasn't changed. Kalith closed the fridge and turned to face him, her expression softening. Neither has yours, though I must admit, I didn't expect you to still be here, living on Earth, surrounded by this. She gestured vaguely at the cluttered room, where half-assembled robotics and outdated tech were scattered like relics of a forgotten era. Well, Elliot said, shrugging, life happened. Or rather, it didn't. I left the stars behind a long time ago. Kalith's gaze lingered on him, her luminous eyes unreadable. Why? The question hung in the air, heavier than he expected. He took a deep breath, searching for an answer that didn't sound like an excuse. I guess I got tired of chasing something I couldn't catch. Out there I was just another cog in the machine. Here at least, I can tinker in peace. Kalith crossed the room and sat across from him, her presence both comforting and unsettling. And yet you don't seem at peace, not entirely. Elliot chuckled dryly. That obvious, huh? She smiled, a gesture that seemed to light up the room. You were always an open book to me, Elliot, even when you tried not to be. He looked away, the weight of her words pressing against memories he'd buried long ago. So, he said, changing the subject, you came all this way to, what? Revisit the past? Kalith's smile faded, replaced by something more serious. Not just revisit. Understand. When you left Solithara, you told me that love was the most powerful force in the universe, that it could bridge the gap between species, between worlds. I've spent years trying to understand what you meant. Elliot raised an eyebrow. And, she continued, I've come to realize that love isn't something I can study from afar. It's not an equation to solve or a concept to grasp. It's something I have to experience. With you. Elliot leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. Kalith, that was a long time ago. I'm not the same person I was back then. And honestly, I'm not sure I even know what love is anymore. Kalith's expression softened. That's why I need your help. To find out. Together. He opened his mouth to protest, but the words caught in his throat. Instead, he let out a weary sigh. You always did have a way of making impossible things sound reasonable. Calith's smile returned, this time tinged with mischief. It's one of my many talents, along with deciphering human sarcasm, which, by the way, is much harder than you think. Elliot laughed despite himself. You're not wrong. Sarcasm's practically a second language here. Calith leaned forward, her gaze intent. Then teach me. Show me what it means to be human, to love, to laugh, to live. He hesitated, the enormity of her request settling over him like a weight. But before he could respond, Lila floated into the room, her blue light flickering impatiently. Sorry to interrupt your heartfelt reunion, the AI said, but if you're going to embark on some grand emotional journey, can we at least upgrade the toaster first? I'm tired of watching it incinerate bread. Calith tilted her head, amused. Your AI companion has quite the personality. Elliot groaned. Don't encourage her. She's insufferable enough as it is. Insufferable? Lila retorted. I'll have you know I'm the pinnacle of advanced technology. If anything, you're the insufferable one. Calith chuckled, a sound that seemed to fill the room with warmth. I see you've surrounded yourself with beings who challenge you. That's good. It means you haven't lost your spark. Elliot shook his head, a small smile tugging at his lips. You're impossible, you know that? Calith's expression turned serious again. Perhaps. But so is love. And yet, here we are. The room fell silent, the weight of her words settling over them. For a moment, Elliot let himself really remember the time they'd shared on Solithera. The laughter, the wonder, the connection that had felt so impossibly rare. Maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late to find that again. All right, he said finally, meeting her gaze. I'll help you. But don't say I didn't warn you. Humans are a mess. We're flawed, stubborn, and completely irrational. Calith's smile widened, her eyes sparkling with a mix of excitement and determination. Good. Then we'll have plenty to work with. As the night stretched on, the two of them began to talk, really talk, about the past, the present, and the uncharted future. And for the first time in years, Elliot felt something stir within him. Hope. The next morning, Elliot woke up to a sound he couldn't immediately place, a soft melodic hum that seemed to resonate through the walls of his house. At first, he thought it was another one of Lila's attempts to improve the ambiance. But as he shuffled groggily into the living room, he realized the source of the sound was Calith. She was sitting cross-legged on the floor, her shimmering form catching the morning light like a prism. In front of her floated a small spherical device emitting a faint, pulsing glow. The hum rose and fell in rhythm with her movements as she guided the sphere with subtle gestures, her hands tracing patterns in the air. Elliot blinked, still half asleep. Is that meditation, or are you summoning an intergalactic pizza delivery service? Calith opened one eye, a hint of amusement dancing on her lips. Good morning to you too, Elliot. This is a Solitheran focus sphere. It helps align my energy fields. Elliot yawned, scratching the back of his head. Well, it's very zen, but you might want to dial it down before the neighbors start calling in UFO sightings. Calith chuckled, the sphere dissolving into a fine mist that evaporated into the air. I'll try to be more discreet. Speaking of neighbors, do they often spy on you through the windows? Elliot frowned. What are you talking about? Calith gestured toward the front window, where the curtains were slightly parted. Elliot followed her gaze and groaned when he saw the unmistakable silhouette of Mrs. Harrow, his perpetually curious next-door neighbor, peering through the glass. Great, he muttered. She's probably convinced I'm harboring an alien fugitive, which, to be fair, isn't entirely wrong. Calith's expression turned playful. Should I introduce myself? Perhaps assure her I come in peace? Elliot shook his head, already moving toward the window. No need. I'll handle it. He stepped outside, plastering on his most disarming smile. Morning, Mrs. Harrow. Lovely day, isn't it? The elderly woman jumped slightly, clearly caught off guard. She recovered quickly, her sharp eyes narrowing. Elliot Kane, who is that woman in your house? And don't tell me she's a friend. I've never seen anyone like her before. Elliot hesitated, his mind racing for an explanation that wouldn't involve intergalactic diplomacy. She's, a visiting artist from a very faraway place. Mrs. Harrow's eyebrows shot up. An artist, you say? What kind of art does she do? Before Elliot could fabricate a convincing answer, Kalith appeared at the door, her radiant presence immediately drawing Mrs. Harrow's attention. "Good morning," Kalith said warmly, stepping onto the porch. "I'm Kalith. It's a pleasure to meet you." Mrs. Harrow's suspicion wavered, replaced by curiosity. "Kalith? That's an unusual name. Where are you from, dear?" Kalith smiled, her expression perfectly composed. "Oh, here and there. I've traveled quite a bit." Elliot suppressed a groan. Technically true, but not exactly reassuring. "Well," Mrs. Harrow said, her tone softening, "it's nice to see Elliot finally having some company. He spends far too much time alone, you know." Kalith nodded solemnly. "I've noticed. It's why I'm here, to help him reconnect with the world." Mrs. Harrow beamed, clearly charmed. "What a wonderful friend you are. If you ever need anything, don't hesitate to ask." As she walked away, Elliot turned to Kalith, his arms crossed. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" Kalith's smile widened. "A little. She seems kind." "Kind?" Elliot scoffed. "She once reported me to the authorities because she thought my drone was spying on her garden." Kalith tilted her head, intrigued. "Was it?" Elliot sighed. "That's not the point." The rest of the day was a chaotic blend of Kalith's attempts to adapt to Earth life and Elliot's increasingly futile efforts to keep her presence under the radar. At one point, she managed to convince Lila to access the local internet, resulting in a brief but catastrophic attempt to understand memes. "I don't get it," Kalith said, staring at a screen displaying a picture of a grumpy cat. "Why is this humorous?" Elliot pinched the bridge of his nose. "It's not about logic, it's about context, and cats are inherently funny." Kalith frowned. "They don't seem funny. They seem calculating. Predatory." Lila chimed in, her tone smug. "She's not wrong. Cats are basically furry overlords waiting for the right moment to seize power." Elliot threw his hands up. "Great. Now my alien guest and my AI are conspiring against cats. What's next, world domination?" Kalith's eyes sparkled with mischief. "Not today. I'm still getting used to your toaster." As evening fell, Elliot found himself sitting on the porch with Kalith, the two of them watching the stars emerge one by one. The air was cool and still, the kind of quiet that made it easy to forget the chaos of the day. "Do you miss it?" Kalith asked softly, her gaze fixed on the sky. "Miss what?" Elliot replied, though he already knew the answer. "The stars. The adventure." The unknown. Elliot hesitated, the question pulling at something deep inside him. "Sometimes," he admitted, "but it's not the same without someone to share it with." Kalith turned to him, her expression unreadable. "You once shared it with me." He looked away, the weight of her words settling over him. "That was a long time ago, Kalith. I'm not sure I'm the same person anymore." "Neither am I," she said quietly. "But maybe that's why we found each other again." For a moment, neither of them spoke, the silence filled only by the faint rustle of the trees. And as Elliot looked up at the stars, he couldn't help but wonder if maybe, just maybe, there was still a place for him among them. This time, with Kalith by his side. The following morning, Elliot awoke to the sound of muffled voices coming from the kitchen. He groaned, rolling out of bed, and shuffled down the hall to investigate. As he rounded the corner, he was greeted by the surreal sight of Kalith sitting at the table with Mrs. Harrow, who was gesturing animatedly with a plate of cookies in hand. "Oh, good, you're up," Mrs. Harrow exclaimed. I was just telling your friend here about the time I caught Mr. Jenkins trying to trim my azaleas without permission. Can you believe the nerve of some people?" Kalith nodded solemnly, though her glowing eyes sparkled with barely concealed amusement. "It's a grave offense, surely." Elliot blinked, trying to process the scene. "Kalith, what are you doing?" "She invited me over," Kalith replied innocently. It seemed rude to decline. Mrs. Harrow beamed. "Such a polite young lady, unlike some people who never accept my invitations." Elliot groaned, running a hand through his hair. "Mrs. Harrow, I'm sure Kalith appreciates your hospitality, but she's not exactly local." Mrs. Harrow waved a hand dismissively. "Nonsense! Everyone deserves a warm welcome no matter where they're from." She leaned in conspiratorially. "Though I must say, her accent is quite unique. Is it Scandinavian?" Kalith opened her mouth, but Elliot cut her off with a forced laugh. "Sure, let's go with that." Once Mrs. Harrow had finally left, Elliot slumped into a chair, his head in his hands. "You do realize she's going to tell the entire neighborhood about you now, right?" Kalith shrugged, unbothered. "Is that a problem? I thought humans valued community bonds." "We do," Elliot said, exasperated, "but not when those bonds involve people poking their noses into things they shouldn't." Kalith tilted her head, studying him. "You're very protective of your privacy. Is that a human trait, or just yours?" "Let's just say it's a survival tactic," Elliot muttered. "Now, can we please focus on why you're here? You wanted to understand love, remember?" Kalith's expression softened. "I haven't forgotten, but isn't part of love understanding the world of the one you care about?" Elliot sighed, conceding the point. "Fine. If you're so curious about Earth, I'll give you the grand tour, but no more inviting the neighbors over for cookies." Kalith smiled, her enthusiasm infectious. "Agreed. Where do we start?" Their first stop was the local market, a bustling hub of noise, color, and chaos. Elliot figured it was as good a place as any to give Kalith a crash course in human culture. Kalith's eyes widened as she took in the scene, her gaze darting from the vendors hawking their wares to the children chasing each other through the crowd. "It's overwhelming," she admitted. "Welcome to Earth," Elliot said dryly. As they wandered through the market, Kalith's curiosity seemed boundless. She marveled at the variety of fruits and vegetables, questioned the purpose of a booth selling novelty socks, and nearly caused a scene when she tried to communicate with a parrot in a pet shop window. "It's mimicking me," she exclaimed, her delight palpable. "That's kind of its whole deal," Elliot said, trying not to laugh. "It's called a parrot. They're known for imitating sounds." Kalith leaned closer to the bird, her voice lowering conspiratorially. "You're very talented." The parrot squawked in response, and Kalith beamed. "I think it likes me." Elliot shook his head, amused despite himself. "You're impossible." The day continued in much the same way, with Kalith's fascination turning even mundane errands into mini-adventures. At one point, she insisted on trying ice cream, which led to an impromptu lesson on brain freezes. "You didn't warn me it would attack my head," she complained, clutching her temples. "I didn't think I needed to," Elliot replied, barely suppressing a laugh. "It's cold. You eat it too fast, you pay the price." Kalith glared at him, though the effect was undermined by the smear of chocolate on her upper lip. Humans are far too casual about food-related hazards. By the time they returned home, the sun was setting, casting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Kalith stood on the porch, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "It's beautiful," she said softly. Elliot joined her, his hands in his pockets. "Yeah, it is. I guess I don't stop to appreciate it as much as I should." Kalith turned to him, her expression thoughtful. "Today was enlightening. Your world is chaotic, flawed, and often illogical, but it's also vibrant, resilient, and full of wonder. I think I'm beginning to understand why you love it so much." Elliot looked at her, surprised. "I didn't realize I was that obvious." Calith smiled. You don't have to say it. It's in the way you talk about the little things, the quirks and oddities that make this place unique. It's the same way you used to talk about the stars. Elliot's chest tightened, the weight of her words stirring something he hadn't felt in years. Maybe I just needed a reminder. Calith reached out, her hand brushing against his. Then let me remind you. For a moment, they stood in silence, the connection between them as tangible as the cool evening air. And as the first stars began to appear in the sky, Elliot found himself wondering if maybe, just maybe, he'd found something worth holding on to again. Even if it came in the form of an alien woman who still didn't fully understand the concept of memes. Elliot awoke to the sound of clanging metal and a faint whiff of something burning. His heart sank. He threw on a robe and rushed to the kitchen, fully expecting to find Calith dismantling his coffee maker in her endless quest for earthly knowledge. Instead, he found her standing over the stove, a spatula in one hand and a pan in the other. Smoke billowed around her, and the pan's contents looked suspiciously like they'd been through a small meteor storm. "Good morning," Calith said brightly, as if nothing were amiss. Elliot coughed, waving away the smoke. "What are you doing?" "Cooking breakfast," she replied, her tone proud. "I read that it's a customary gesture of care among humans." Elliot stared at the pan, then at her. "Did you read the part about not incinerating it?" Calith frowned, glancing at the pan. "It's, well done. Humans like variety, don't they?" Elliot pinched the bridge of his nose, biting back a laugh. "Let's just say we have a slightly different definition of well done." He took the pan from her, setting it aside. "How about I handle breakfast, and you handle not burning down the house?" Calith crossed her arms, her expression mock indignant. "You're underestimating me. Again." Elliot smirked. "I'm just trying to survive the day. That's all." Once breakfast, a non-charred one, was out of the way, Elliot decided it was time to tackle the growing list of questions Calith had been compiling. She'd started jotting them down on scraps of paper, and by now, the pile rivaled a small novella. "All right," Elliot said, sitting on the couch with a sigh. "Let's do this. What's first on the list?" Calith pulled out a slip of paper and read aloud. "Why do humans insist on using forks when hands are more efficient?" Elliot raised an eyebrow. "Efficient?" "Sure, but also messy. Forks are about keeping things civilized." Calith tilted her head. "Civilized? You mean like your pizza nights, where everyone eats with their hands and argues about toppings?" Elliot opened his mouth, then closed it. "Okay, bad example. What's next?" Calith shuffled through the papers, her glowing eyes scanning the notes. Here's a good one. Why do humans have such an obsession with coffee?" Elliot held up his mug. This is why. Without it, we'd be a species of sleep-deprived zombies." Calith leaned closer, studying the mug as if it held the secrets of the universe. "It's a stimulant, correct? Does it enhance cognitive function?" Elliot took a sip. "It makes mornings tolerable. That's all the enhancement I need." Calith smirked. "Fascinating. Your species has built an entire culture around a bean." As the day went on, Elliot found himself answering questions that ranged from the philosophical, "Why do humans fear death?" to the absurd, "What is the evolutionary purpose of neckties?" At one point, Calith became fixated on the concept of pets. "So," she said, pacing the room, "humans keep animals in their homes, feed them, care for them, and receive no practical benefit in return." Elliot shrugged. "Not everything has to be practical. Pets make us happy." Calith stopped pacing, her brow furrowed. "Happiness is a sufficient justification?" "Yeah," Elliot said, smiling. "Sometimes it's the only justification you need." Calith considered this, her expression softening. "Perhaps that's something I need to learn." Elliot chuckled. "Don't worry. Stick around long enough, and you'll pick up all kinds of useless but fun habits." The afternoon, Elliot decided to introduce Caleth to a quintessential Earth pastime: movies. He queued up a classic sci-fi flick, figuring it would be a good mix of entertainment and a sly nod to their current situation. Caleth watched intently, her eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. As the film progressed, her questions came fast and furious. "Why is the alien always portrayed as hostile?" she asked, frowning at the screen. "Because it's more exciting that way," Elliot replied. Caleth huffed. "It's also wildly inaccurate. Most interstellar species avoid conflict unless provoked." Elliot smirked. "Yeah, but alien negotiates a peaceful trade agreement doesn't exactly scream blockbuster." Caleth rolled her eyes, but a smile tugged at her lips. Humans do love their drama. By evening, the two of them were back on the porch, the sky above painted in hues of twilight. Caleth had grown quiet, her earlier enthusiasm giving way to a contemplative mood. "You've been unusually thoughtful today," Elliot said, breaking the silence. Caleth glanced at him, her expression unreadable. "It's just, there's so much about your world that's both baffling and beautiful. I didn't expect to feel so connected to it." Elliot leaned back, his gaze drifting to the stars. "It's not perfect, but it's home." Caleth nodded, her gaze softening. "And you love it, despite its flaws." "Yeah," Elliot said. "I guess I do." Caleth turned to him, her voice quiet. "I think I'm starting to understand what love means to humans. It's not just about the grand gestures or the perfect moments. It's about finding beauty in the imperfections, in the chaos." Elliot looked at her, surprised by the depth of her words. "That's pretty spot on, actually." Caleth smiled, a faint glow radiating from her. "Then perhaps I'm not as alien as I thought." For a moment, they sat in silence, the connection between them growing stronger with each passing second. And as the first stars began to twinkle in the night sky, Elliot couldn't help but feel that, for the first time in years, he wasn't alone. Not entirely, anyway. The morning started innocuously enough. Elliot was sitting at his kitchen table, sipping coffee and reading the news on his tablet, when Caleth burst into the room, her eyes glowing with excitement. "I've done it," she declared, holding up a small metallic device that hummed faintly in her hand. Elliot raised an eyebrow. "Done what? Invented a way to clean up your cooking experiments?" Caleth ignored the jab, setting the device on the table with a flourish. "I've constructed a transdimensional communicator. Now we can contact my ship without waiting for it to return to this sector." Elliot stared at the device, his skepticism palpable. "And you built this... how?" "With my toaster and some duct tape." Caleth smirked. "You underestimate the versatility of human appliances." Before Elliot could respond, the device emitted a series of beeps and began projecting a holographic display into the air. The image resolved into a tall, stern-looking alien with deep blue skin and a crown of bioluminescent spines. "Caleth," the alien said, his voice resonating with authority. "You were instructed to observe, not interfere." Caleth winced but held her ground. "Captain Wren, I've made significant progress in understanding human emotional constructs. Interference was necessary to achieve results." Elliot leaned toward the hologram, his coffee mug still in hand. "So, you're her boss? Nice to meet you, big fan of your glowing aesthetic." Wren's piercing gaze shifted to Elliot, his expression unreadable. "And who are you?" Elliot grinned. "Just your average Earth guy. Coffee drinker, taxpayer, occasionally dragged into alien drama." Caleth shot him a look, her tone exasperated. "Elliot, please." Wren's spines flickered, a sign of either irritation or amusement. It was hard to tell. "Caleth, your mission was to study humans discreetly, not to form attachments." Caleth's posture stiffened. "This attachment is precisely why I've made progress. Love cannot be understood from a distance." Elliot cleared his throat. "Not to interrupt the intergalactic HR meeting, but why does it sound like you're in trouble?" Caleth hesitated, her usual confidence faltering. "The council may not approve of my methods, or my prolonged stay." Elliot frowned. "What happens if they don't approve?" Rin's expression darkened. "She'll be recalled immediately, and her research will be terminated." After the call ended, Kalith sat in silence, her usual spark dimmed. Elliot watched her, his own frustration bubbling to the surface. "So, what now?" he asked. Kalith looked at him, her eyes filled with uncertainty. "I don't know. If the council deems my actions inappropriate, I may not have a choice." Elliot leaned back, his jaw tightening. "You're telling me some bureaucrats light years away get to decide whether you stay or go? That's ridiculous." Kalith gave him a sad smile. "It's the way of my people. Our actions must serve the greater good." Elliot scoffed. "Yeah, well, sometimes the greater good sucks." Kalith chuckled softly. "Your bluntness is oddly comforting." Determined to lighten the mood, Elliot suggested a trip to the park. Kalith agreed, though her usual enthusiasm was muted. As they strolled through the winding paths, Elliot tried to distract her with Earth trivia. "Did you know ducks have regional accents?" he asked, pointing to a pond where several ducks were quacking noisily. Kalith raised an eyebrow. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious," Elliot said, grinning. "Apparently city ducks quack differently than country ducks." Kalith's lips twitched, a reluctant smile breaking through. "Your planet never ceases to amaze me." They sat on a bench near the pond, watching the ducks paddle around. For a moment, the weight of impending decision seemed to lift. "You know," Elliot said, breaking the silence, "if your council doesn't understand why you're here, maybe they're the ones who need a lesson in humanity." Kalith looked at him, her expression thoughtful. "You think I should challenge them?" Elliot shrugged. "Why not? You've already broken a bunch of rules. Might as well go all in." Kalith laughed, the sound light and genuine. "You make rebellion sound so simple." Elliot grinned. "It's one of our specialties." That evening, back at the house, Kalith began preparing for her next communication with the council. Elliot, meanwhile, was determined to help in his own way. He rummaged through his closet, eventually emerging with a collection of Earth memorabilia, photos, trinkets, and even an old snow globe. "What's all this?" Kalith asked, watching as he spread the items on the table. "Exhibits A through Z," Elliot said. "If you're going to argue your case, you need evidence. Show them what makes Earth worth understanding." Kalith picked up the snow globe, shaking it gently. The tiny flakes swirled around a miniature cityscape. "This is beautiful." Elliot smiled. "It's a metaphor, I guess. Even in the chaos there's beauty. You just have to look for it." Kalith set the snow globe down, her expression resolute. "Then I'll make them see it. All of it." The next day, Kalith activated the communicator again, this time with Elliot by her side. When Rin's holographic form appeared, Kalith wasted no time. "Captain, I request an audience with the council," she said firmly. "I wish to present my findings directly." Rin's spines flickered. "That's highly irregular." Kalith met his gaze, unflinching. "So is love, but it's worth understanding." Rin studied her for a long moment before nodding. "Very well, I'll arrange it, but be warned, Kalith, this will not be an easy battle." Kalith glanced at Elliot, who gave her an encouraging nod. "I'm ready," she said. As the hologram faded, Elliot turned to her, his expression serious. "You've got this." Kalith smiled, her confidence restored. "With you by my side, I believe I do." And for the first time since her arrival, Elliot felt a flicker of hope. Whatever happened next, they would face it together. The morning of the council hearing arrived, marked by a strange mix of anticipation and dread. Elliot stood in his living room, nervously adjusting his tie. He hadn't worn one in years, and was fairly certain he'd tied it wrong, but Kalith assured him the council wouldn't notice, or care. "You look sufficiently Earthly, Kalith said, her tone teasing. She was dressed in a shimmering, iridescent gown that seemed to shift colors with her movements, a stark contrast to Elliot's mismatched blazer and khakis. Thanks, Elliot said dryly. Glad to know I'm meeting alien dress codes. Kalith smiled, though her usual confidence was tinged with apprehension. Are you ready? Elliot took a deep breath. Not even a little. But let's do this. Kalith activated the transdimensional communicator, and the living room dissolved into a shimmering field of light. When the glow faded, they found themselves standing in a vast circular chamber. The walls pulsed faintly, as if alive, and the air hummed with an energy that made Elliot's skin tingle. At the center of the chamber was the council, a semicircle of elevated platforms, each occupied by a different alien species. Some were humanoid, others decidedly not. Their collective presence was both awe-inspiring and intimidating. Kalith stepped forward, her voice steady. Honored council members, I stand before you to present my findings on human emotional constructs, specifically love. One of the council members, a serpentine being with shimmering scales, leaned forward. Kalith, your mission was to observe, not to engage. Your actions have disrupted the parameters of your assignment. Kalith nodded. I acknowledge that I deviated from the original mission, but I believe my methods were necessary to truly understand the complexity of human emotions. Another council member, a crystalline entity that emitted a soft glow, spoke. And what evidence do you have to support this claim? Kalith gestured to Elliot, who stepped forward hesitantly. This is Elliot. He has been my primary subject. Elliot cleared his throat, feeling the weight of a dozen alien eyes, or their equivalents, on him. Hi. So, I guess I'm here to represent humanity. No pressure, right? A low murmur rippled through the chamber, and Elliot caught Kalith suppressing a smile. Elliot began his impromptu presentation, using the collection of Earth memorabilia they'd brought. He showed the council photos of families, friends, and moments of joy. He explained the significance of holidays, traditions, and even seemingly trivial things like movie nights and pizza debates. And then there's this, Elliot said, holding up the snow globe. It's a tiny, imperfect world, but it's beautiful because of its imperfections. That's what love is like. It's messy and complicated, but it's also what makes life worth living. The crystalline council members' glow brightened. An intriguing perspective, but how does this justify Kalith's actions? Elliot hesitated, then looked at Kalith. Because love isn't something you can understand from the outside. You have to experience it, and that's what Kalith did. She didn't just study us, she became one of us. Kalith stepped forward, her voice filled with emotion. I've learned that love is not a weakness, as some might believe. It's a strength. It drives humans to create, to connect, and to endure. It's something worth understanding and preserving. For a moment, the chamber was silent. Then Rin, who had been watching from the sidelines, spoke. Kalith's actions were unorthodox, but her findings are compelling. Perhaps we too have something to learn from this love. The serpentine council member hissed softly, its tone contemplative. If we allow Kalith to continue her research, it must be with strict oversight. The crystalline entity nodded. Agreed, but her work has value. Let it proceed. Kalith's eyes glowed brighter, her relief palpable. Thank you, honored council. Elliot exhaled, his tension melting away. So, does this mean we're not in trouble? Rin's spines flickered with amusement. Not this time, human. Back in the living room, the communicator powered down, leaving Elliot and Kalith standing in the soft glow of the evening sun. The weight of the day lifted, replaced by a quiet sense of triumph. So, Elliot said, breaking the silence, what happens now? Kalith smiled, her expression serene. I stay, at least for now. There's still so much to learn. And to teach. Elliot nodded, a grin tugging at his lips. Good, because I was starting to get used to having you around. Calith laughed, the sound light and musical. You've been an excellent teacher, Elliot, even if your cooking skills are questionable. Hey, Elliot said, feigning offense. I'll have you know my lasagna is legendary. Calith tilted her head, her glowing eyes playful. Then perhaps that will be our next experiment. As the stars began to dot the night sky, Elliot and Calith sat on the porch, sharing a quiet moment. The journey that had begun with an unexpected reunion had transformed into something far greater, a connection that bridged worlds and defied expectations. For Elliot, it was a reminder that love, in all its messy, unpredictable glory, was worth fighting for. And for Calith, it was the beginning of a new understanding, not just of humanity, but of herself. Do you think they'll ever really get it? Elliot asked, gazing at the stars. Calith smiled. Perhaps, but even if they don't, we do, and that's enough. As the night deepened, the two of them sat together, their laughter and shared stories weaving a bond that no counsel, no distance, and no rule could break. And in that moment, under the infinite expanse of the cosmos, they found something rare and precious, a love that transcended worlds.